Hi, everybody. Welcome to the IC Topic Chat for today, December 4th, 2025. We are doing our annual core topic on key performance indicators. Let's jump into it. So IC Topic Chats, as you know, if you're watching this on YouTube, where we've got probably over 200, maybe close to 250 links at this point, different videos. We started back in May 2020, and we've been going about the 250th, 60th session. We've been going for quite a while now. Key performance indicators, let's just go into what that is. KPI is the acronym, key performance indicator. Why are we doing it? Well, think about this kind of like a lot of us, since we're evaluators, or most of us are evaluators, we do logic models to help people understand what they're intending to do, from the inputs on the far left over to the impacts on the far right. And in between, we've got activities and perhaps outputs and short-term outcomes and long-term outcomes. Effectively, those are key performance indicators. Your outcomes are the things that are demonstrating that you did, in fact, do the things you were intending to do. And in that, we encourage our clients and our funded projects to have logic models. A key performance indicator makes a lot of sense for us as well. Why are we doing this? Honestly, because you want to sleep at night, right? You want to measure your progress towards your goals. What are those goals? A lot of us is just to remain independent, to keep a business going that can sustain our livelihoods, to keep our quality of life the same way it has been. And it helps not only know that you're there or you're moving in that direction, but to help you predict what's going to happen, and also help you with your scoping for new projects. Yeah, so it's informing your decisions. A lot of us are thinking about our KPIs, particularly around time, so that we know, hey, I overworked this project or I underworked this project, and I need to make sure I put in more time or ask for more on the next time I do a similar type of project. And I think if you were paying attention a month ago with tracking time, this is super important. All right, so let's see here. I got way too many slides up at this point. Let's talk about some different KPIs. The number one, and I think when we did this about 4 years ago for the first time, and I had no idea what to talk about because I wasn't really doing a very good job of thinking about KPIs at the time, was profitability. I remember Kurt said this, am I making money? This is a real simple calculation. How much revenue did you have? What are your expenses? Do you have anything left at the end of the day? So if you're an S corp like us, we have salaries and we have insurance and we have this office space and software and other things. And so you need to know what your revenue is and your expenses, and is there anything left? And so we use QuickBooks, and QuickBooks, it's always interesting. QuickBooks tells me I have a lot more profit than I actually do. And I'm like, where's that money going? It does kind of depend on when you're running your calculations, though. If it's right before payroll, it looks like you're doing really well. If you do it the day after payroll, you go, oh, maybe not so well. But that's a real simple way of looking at it. And for a lot of you, this may be the last thing you think about. Was I profitable this year? You will see that also at the end of the year. But I mean, you should kind of have a sense for your profitability throughout the year. Are you going to be able to meet all of your expenses for the year? So you should know them from previous years. And I use just an Excel spreadsheet. Actually, I think it's Google Sheets now. Anyway, I use a simple spreadsheet of all my expenses that I anticipate throughout the year, when my revenue is coming in, and whether I'm going to, I'll be profitable for that month. Are we going to need to dip into a line of credit or savings or something like that? And so that's the main calculation I think most of us are interested in for our KPI. Now, you probably ought to also be thinking about your project profitability. How much does it cost to conduct the work? Is it just your time, or do you have other people's time? Do you have subcontractors? Do you have employees? And what's the revenue? So this is just a simple calculation: project revenue minus the cost to conduct the work. Maybe you have to spend money on some fancy software. Other things, do you have to buy additional insurance? Who knows? So this is the difference between the revenue generated by a project and the cost of delivering that work, as it says there in the definition. Pretty simple calculation. This is probably the second KPI you should be thinking about. Now, I know this is another one that we started paying more attention to over the last 2 years, is your hit rate. How many proposals do you put out, and how many are successful? And if your hit rate's really high, obviously you're doing well, and maybe you should be stretching and doing more. If your hit rate's really low, a low percentage, maybe you need to think more carefully about where you're submitting your proposals. Maybe you're submitting too many what we call cold RFPs, proposals for places that really don't know you exist, and you're kind of outside of their the ordinary kind of proposal. Or maybe you're writing your proposals wrong and you need some assistance. And so that's the way to think about a hit rate. How about the utilization rate? Now, this is your percentage of billable hours worked. How many hours do you have to work? And how many of that is on client-related work or billable hours? That's a pretty good calculation. A lot of us need to know that, particularly when we're thinking about how much work we can do. It's good for us to be paying attention to how many hours we're spending on non-billable or client-facing time, like on administration or marketing, or spending time with us here in professional development, which kind of falls under the marketing for a lot of us too. But if your productivity is really high, that's really good. If it's super high, you might want to think about whether, and particularly if you're not very profitable and you have a high productivity, you might want to think about raising your rates. If you're very, very profitable and you have low productivity, that's probably a pretty good, because you're not having to work a lot and you're making a lot of money. So you obviously have some skills there. You might want to think about that too. Maybe you could be working more if you wanted to make more money. So these are the sorts of things that we think about there. Let's talk about forecast rate. The number of actual hours over or under a forecasted hours per project. So this is, you predict, hey, we're going to work 100 hours on this project for the year. That's what you have budgeted. We know 100 hours times our billing rate is the amount of revenue we anticipate getting. Are you on track for that? And how over or under are you? In many ways, this is a good thing to be paying attention to throughout the year when you're tracking your hours. So you know, hey, I have 20 more hours to work on this. Oh, and I have an annual report that's due in, January. How many hours is that going to take? And is that going to put me way over? I mean, this is where you start to say, oh, I've got some scope creep. They keep asking me to do these small little add-ons, and it's not a big deal until I'm way over my hours for the project, my forecasted hours. The next piece is an interesting one, is your overhead rate, or something you'll hear about F&A rates or costs. That's your costs to run your business that are not specifically direct costs. So labor would be your direct costs. So you look at your total organizational costs. What does it cost to run your business? And then your F&A rate. Things that would go into your F&A rate may be like rent, insurance, software. Those are costs that are spread across your business that aren't specific to a project. And so, these overhead rates can vary based upon the type of business. When you're a one-person operation, they're probably relatively low, probably between 15 and 25%. When you have a bigger operation, when you need more software and more insurance, and perhaps you need an office space, you're going to be in the 30 to 40% rate. Universities are notorious for having 50% indirect cost rates. So that's why a lot of people are like, I can't work with that university. For every dollar they receive, they need to take another 50 cents and put it into their overhead rate. That's how that would work. Next one for you is a median project value. This is a good one to know because a lot of us are thinking, what's my, we would say average, but you don't want to use average. You want to use median, because you could have a really big contract that would throw your average off or skew the results. So what's your median project value? A lot of us like to know this because we'd like to probably grow that over time. Whereas about 10 years ago, most of my projects I would bid out at like $10,000. And I thought, hey, that's great because I was a one person operation and I can get this work done. And I realized when I started paying attention to some of the previous KPIs, we needed to raise our rates. We needed to raise our, and plus there was inflation happening. And so I would pay attention to this. So um, nowadays, those $10,000 projects are often 18 to 22,000, and that's just what we need. And honestly, when I realized that's what they needed to be, and I started asking for it, we had a couple people kick back and say, "Oh, well, that's more than what I was expecting." But just as many people, particularly newer clients, were like, "Oh, okay, if that's what it costs, then that's what it costs." And so that helped out. And so I've seen the median project value grow over time. All right. What are some of our KPIs? One of the ones that we're really interested in, of course, is past due invoices. How many invoices are over 30 days? And so we know to pay attention to that and send follow-ups and things like that. We usually don't have very many that go beyond 60 days, but sometimes, it happens. It's pretty regular for, I don't know, a quarter of our invoices to reach the 30-day mark, and we do a follow-up, and usually they're like, "Oh yeah, that's right. I sent that along for the board notes, or it needs to be approved by so and so, and it'll be paid next week." And so just a reminder. What kind of savings do we have? And what's that percent of savings to our annual budget? Um, that gives us kind of a sense for how much time we can go without getting paid. So it's kind of related to the past due invoices if we needed to dip into savings. Um, what is our year-to-date consulting net income versus last year's consulting net income? We look at that. A couple other ones we're looking at. In our proposals, I talked about the hit rate. One of the things we particularly think about is our developing, our submitted, and pending. So developing are what are the ones we're currently working on? What are the ones that have been submitted, things we're waiting to hear back from, and ones that are in the process of getting funded or what we call pending. So if we get that, if you're for us, the National Science Foundation would ask questions to the client, our client, to the individuals they probably will fund, and that often means not 100% of the time, but that often means they're getting ready to fund it, but they need some clarification on some things before they can give the award letter. The other one is client satisfaction. Um, are we meeting their expectations? What percent of our clients are satisfied with the services we're providing? And we have different ways of doing this, but a lot of our teams put that out through an annual survey that they do to the client teams that are for the project, but we put a couple questions on at the end that says, that asks about their satisfaction with working with us as evaluators. Additional KPIs that we don't use that I think are interesting. What are your consultant billable capacity hours? So how many hours do you have available that should be dedicated to client-facing work? So if you have 2,080 hours during the year, you take off all those things for vacations and things like that, maybe you end up with 1,200 hours that you could work in client-facing work. How many hours do you have that are not dedicated? It's similar to the earlier your consultant rate, your consultant utilization rate. Revenue per consultant. So if you have multiple consultants on your team, how much revenue is coming in for the work for different individuals? You can either do that as a straight number where you're saying, well, this individual had 5 projects, and the 5 projects are worth X dollars per year. And then you can look at that relative to different individuals, or you could do it based upon the hours that they're working. It's probably better to do a calculation where you're looking at their hours committed to that because are they efficient with their time? There's a churn rate, so that would be the number of clients you started and you've lost over the time. So how many customers have left your firm, and so that would be a churn rate. Day sales outstanding. that's the account, your accounts receivable divided by your total revenue times the number of days in the year, 365 days. So how many times, when you put your invoices out, how long are you waiting before you get paid? Average real fees per hour. So that's what you're actually receiving. So if you look at your what you're billing at, but if you divide what you're billing at divided by the number of hours you're actually working, you may find that I'm sorry, that calculation is the revenue divided by the actual hours. So perhaps you have a billing rate of $150, and that's what you budgeted it out as. But if you do the actual math, you might find you're below $100 if you're overworking that project by a lot. So what's your actual hours fees per hour? And that might be indicative of you needing to, hold the line a little bit better when you are um, saying yes and no to certain things when they're asking for, or actually when you go to renegotiate that contract or you start new contracts with similar clients to say, well, doesn't take 100 hours per year. This is more like 150 hours per year. So I need to make sure I increase the amount of effort that I have on these sorts of things. Okay, here's some questions that I want to us to all ask and answer during the discussion period in just a second. So, what are your KPIs? What are some of those goals that you're setting? What didn't I cover? What do you wish we covered today? And how would you calculate any of these KPIs differently? But before we go to the questions and we stop the recording, I want to talk about some of these silly KPIs. I say they're silly, but I think they're very serious for some of us. I think I've heard this from two of our folks. How many miles have you biked during the traditional workday? So these are, when we're talking about KPIs, I've been talking about the very functional, important, business oriented ones. But I think for a lot of us, we're talking about what's our quality of life. And so um, some of our bikers like to have this opportunity to get out and do different things. So how about how many naps have you taken, or what's the average number of hours of naps you've taken while still being profitable? So that's important too. This is one of the things I often talk about. I'm literally, I can see where my daughter, who's now in high school, went to elementary school, and it was right over there. And I used to enjoy the opportunity to leave where I'm working right now in my office and to walk down the street and have lunch with her. And so, how many school lunches have I attended during the school year? I don't actually track that. I know some of you guys track some of these a traditional KPIs. Days you walked your dog during office hours. I think I heard that one of the years. How many vacations did you take this year? That's actually, I mean, this is a relative. And I think my 5.5, if you know me, I like a half. How many of those vacations did you take when you were literally on vacation and you didn't do any work? That's an important one too, because you should probably enjoy your vacation. I know for a long time, I would never be able to get away and not do work because I was a one person operation and there was always something that needed to be done and I couldn't just stop. So with that, I want to say hello to everybody out in YouTube land. I want to say goodbye to you guys. If you're live, stick around.